Right, you guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called MS-13, 20th Mission, The Devil's Dance. As far as I can remember, MS-13 has had a presence in San Francisco since the 1980s. There's always been two areas that were considered to be MS-13 strongholds, the Tenderloin, located downtown in the city, and then you had 20th and Mission. There wasn't any particular area or neighborhood where you would find MS-13 members in the Tenderloin. They'd just be out there in different parts of the TL selling their dope or sliding through, doing whatever they were doing out there. However, 20th and Mission was a different story. It's always been known that MS-13 had a small presence right there on 20th, from Mission all the way up to Dolores Park. Back in the 80s and 90s, I remember seeing them out there, either on Mission, by the donut shop, or at Dolores Park. But they always kind of stayed low-key and quiet. They would just be out there selling their weed or carrying on with their business. But up until that point, we never really had any issues with them. They weren't out there at that time kicking up dust, going at it with the Norteños. In fact, even though they were considered to be ops, we went at it more with some of the Sureño hoods than we ever did with MS-13. 19th Street, which is obviously one block down on Mission Street, was one of the strongest and most dangerous Sureño cliques that we went at it with in the city. It wasn't until sometime between 2005 and 2010 that MS-13 emerged and started engaging in conflict with some of the Norteño gangs out there. I was doing time when I first heard that MS was out there in the city actively going after Norteños. I think they ended up aligning themselves with 19th Street, and that's when the war really kicked up a few notches out there. Recently, I narrated a book on this channel titled Operation Devil Horns, the takedown of MS-13. Like I said, prior to reading this book, I was aware of MS-13's presence out there, but I didn't know it was nearly as prevalent as it was. When the war escalated and it was at its highest point, you couldn't wear red or blue in certain parts of the city without getting jammed up or attacked. I've talked about some of the incidents that I personally had with both MS-13 and the Sureños. And aside from the typical street level gangbanging that we were involved in out there, MS-13 took their gangbanging to another level like we did. What I mean by that is this: when things really got bad out there in the city and bodies started getting dropped on both sides, the conflict consisted of typical back and forth gangbanging. They catch a homie slipping out there and they kill him. We'd run it back, catch one of them slipping and kill one of them. They strike through my hood, jump out, kick it off, and then we do the same. It was back and forth and the conflict just continued to escalate. But then we started strategizing and planning coordinated attacks. I talked about this before and I attributed this to the schooling that I was getting in the joint. Because prior to that, I never thought outside the box. I never thought about setting up 2- and 3-way strike zones. I never thought about ambushing these guys or planning the type of things that we were. This was all generated from the NR and NF Glesha that I was picking up in prison. But on the flip side, they also started planning and strategizing as well. The same way we would send a couple of youngsters to walk down to 19th and Mission wearing blue sweats with blue bandanas hanging out of their pockets so they could walk right up to these guys and ambush them. They started doing the same thing. They started rolling right into our hoods, 3 and 4 deep, all flamed up so that the homies would drop their guard, thinking they were fellow Norteños. We'd see them pulling up with red sweatshirts on, wearing red baseball caps and red bandanas tied around their necks. And we'd assume they were homies from Bryant Street or from one of the other neighborhoods out there. Caught off guard and disarmed, one of the homies would approach the vehicle and then they start dumping on them. It was bad out there. It got to the point to where nobody knew who was who. The Sureños from 19th Street were always in the fray, but between 2000 and 2010, the MS-13 members from 20th Street started to get a lot more aggressive and were the ones we had to watch out for. Years later, when I got out around 2013, I went through the whole mission and I was under the impression that both 19th Street and the MS hood that kicked it on 20th had all dispersed. That whole part of the Mission District looked like a ghost town and I didn't see anyone out there. But apparently, they either came back, they never really went away, or they just went dormant. According to some recent media reports, one of their alleged leaders by the name of Elmer Gordo Rodriguez was just recently found guilty of racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of murder in aid of racketeering, 1 count of attempted murder in aid of racketeering, and 1 count of use of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence through his role in the MS-13 20th Street clique. I remember hearing about this case as it involved a norteño from San Bruno by the name of George Martinez. This guy Gordo wasn't the one who actually committed the murder. He was charged with ordering it. So this incident happened right there on the corner of 19th and Mission, outside of a bar called Beauty Bar. I doubt that the victim knew much about that area, because if he did, he probably wouldn't have went to that particular bar. This bar is located where the 19th Street Sureños are always posted up at. In fact, to get inside that bar, you literally have to walk past these guys or walk through them. Norteños from the Mission or from the cities would definitely have known this, and this is the last place that they would have taken family to. That's what tells me that this guy Martinez wasn't familiar with that area, and he wasn't aware of the fact that it was the Sureño neighborhood. He was probably just cruising through the Mission, spotted that place, and assumed that it was a cool spot to go check out. From what I remember, this guy Martinez was out that night celebrating his birthday with his son Jesse Martinez and his son's girlfriend, Jasmine Solares. They had just come from watching a Warriors game and decided to hit a bar for a couple of drinks. While they were at the bar, Martinez stepped outside for a minute while his son Jesse and his girlfriend Jasmine stayed inside. What he apparently didn't know was that Gordo, the alleged leader of MS-13 for the 20th Street clique, was inside the bar with several other members and had identified Martinez as being a possible rival norteño. After Martinez walked out of the bar, this is when Gordo allegedly ordered another MS-13 member to follow him outside and kill him. Obviously, Martinez wasn't aware of this, but while he was outside, a confrontation ensued and he was shot. Martinez's son Jesse and his girlfriend Jasmine had no idea that Martinez had even been shot. They only found out after the ambulance had already transported Martinez to the hospital and after they exited the bar and seen the yellow crime scene caution tape. Initially, nobody was arrested or identified for killing Martinez, but Gordo would later get implicated as being the one who ordered it. However, this was only one of the cases he would later get convicted for. He was also convicted for ordering the murder of Giovanni Alvarez, aka Pee-wee, on May 25, 2017. Pee-wee was a 20th Street clique member who Gordo and others in the clique believed to be cooperating with law enforcement. Cooperating with law enforcement is one of the worst things you could be suspected of, and for MS-13, this is an automatic death sentence. Gordo apparently found out and allegedly sanctioned Pee-wee's murder because of these suspicions. Gordo and 2 of his associates that included Edwin Alvarado Amaya, aka Muerte, and Kenneth Campos, aka Necio, lured Pee-wee into a car. Necio drove the group to Bernal Heights Park, where the group intended to kill him. At the park, Gordo gave a signal to Muerte, who then hacked Pee-wee to death by inflicting dozens of deep wounds to his face and torso with the machete. Muerte and Necio ended up pleading guilty to the crime and were subsequently sentenced for their roles in the murder. Gordo, on the other hand, was also convicted of attempted murder and use of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence, following a shooting that involved an extortion attempt by Gordo and other MS-13 associates on 80th Street in the Tenderloin District on November 26, 2017. Because he was identified as the leader, Gordo's trial featured evidence of MS-13 20th Street clique's other racketeering activities, including 2 other previously unsolved homicides. A member of the 20th Street clique shot German Polanco Gil to death on September 2, 2015 in San Francisco's Bayview district after he and another member spotted Gil walking near his home. The gang member believed Gil was a rival norteño gang member, so they drove around the block, returned to where Gil was walking, and fatally shot him on the sidewalk. Clique member Rogelio Belloso Aoman, aka Smiley, pleaded guilty too, and admitted to his role in this murder. The victim Gil wasn't a norteño. He was killed simply because he was wearing the wrong color that day. But this was a common occurrence in the city. Unsuspecting victims that had no ties to either Norteño or Sureño gangs were getting killed out there, and it was solely based on the color of their clothing. Meanwhile, other members of the 20th Street clique also murdered Gilberto Rodriguez at the Gray Whale Cove parking lot in Pacifica. Those members included Kevin Reyes Melendez, aka Neutron, Kevin Guatemala Zepeda, aka Mission, and Abner Marijuan Algeria, aka Coche, who lured Gilberto Garcia away from San Francisco and ultimately drove him to a remote parking lot in Pacifica where multiple associates, including Neutron, murdered him by stabbing him with a machete and shooting him to death. These guys were active between 2016 and 2017, and they were apparently involved in a number of different incidents. This was all highlighted during Gordo's trial. Some of those incidents included the following: a September 16, 2016 shooting of a suspected Norteño at 21st Street and Hampshire Street. An October 27, 2016 gang assault in the Mission District. A May 17, 2017 gang assault outside of a taqueria in the Mission District. A November 30, 2017 attempted murder at 24th Street and Potrero Avenue in the Mission District. In total, 14 defendants were convicted as part of this investigation, which resulted in convictions relating to 4 murders, 4 attempted murders, and multiple assaults with dangerous weapons. After the Martinez homicide, there were several other homicides that all occurred in the Mission District. On March 22, 2017, Terry Hopkins was stabbed and killed inside of his tent at a homeless encampment near 14th Street and Mission Street. After that, Giovanni Alvarez, aka Pee-wee, was found dead on May 25, 2017 at Bernal Hill Park. He had been stabbed multiple times and hacked to death. This was one of the homicides Gordo was convicted of. On July 10, 2017, Jesus Sandoval was shot outside El Fajarito Taqueria near 24th and Mission Bar Plaza. Gordo faces a mandatory term of life imprisonment under the U.S. sentencing guidelines and the federal statute governing the imposition of a sentence, Title 18 U.S.C. Meanwhile, as of recently, it seems like the gang wars in the Mission District between the Norteños and Sureños have once again reignited. It's safe to say that this puts to rest any speculation whether or not the state's agreement to end hostilities will possibly cease any of the conflict that's taking place on the streets. It's also safe to say that anyone who believes that the Mission District has become a ghost town and that these guys are no longer out there are deceptive observations. These kinds of stories that involve the ongoing war between the Norteños and Sureños have become way too common in most of the big and small cities across Northern California. Some of them involve bona fide gang members, while others involve unsuspecting victims who have merely chosen to wear the wrong color of clothing. I've heard a lot of people say that gangbanging isn't the same anymore, that it's become watered down, and that it's not like it was back in the 90s. This might be true, but numbers don't lie. In some ways, I myself believe that things have definitely gotten better, and that the gangbanging mentality is slowly degrading. But make no mistake about it, it still exists. If you don't walk away with nothing else after hearing about some of these stories, at least know that you still need to be mindful of your surroundings, what color you wear, and where you're at when you're out there. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. We have more of these short profiles dropping soon, so be looking for them. We also have a Q&A that should be dropping in the next few days, so be watching for this as well. We'll keep you guys updated in the community section, just in case YouTube doesn't send out our notifications. In closing, we appreciate all the support. We appreciate you guys for tapping in, and we value each and every one of you as our viewers, as we know that without you, we would cease to exist.